right, so maybe I should wait 1 second. So thanks all of you for coming. I think it's turning into a wonderful, wonderful event. And so my name is Leonard Mwachikon. I'm a professor at Princeton University. I'm also the founder and president of the African School of Economics. And the school set up a couple of years ago, but that's doing really well. We just placed 4 students in the top US PhD program overseas. This is great. So I think I should mention that. All right. So my speech will be about information and governance and about how we could improve the design and the implementation of information and governance experiments in order to be perhaps more rigorous, but also uh, help inform decision making. So there has been an explosion of experimental literature on governance that focus on two main approaches. One is better information. I think we have talked about that quite enough already. And then community-driven development, or encouraging participatory mechanism for accountability and for governance. And as you can see from the papers presented here, and also from the literature, that there is no consistent evidence that these approaches really improve outcome that we care about. So it's not that they do not improve outcome we care about. There is not enough evidence to prove that it does. So, but then we need to ask ourselves why this is not working as we would like, and what we should be doing instead, or how we could improve the way we conduct research on participatory mechanism and also on information. So, and to do this, so I'm going to focus.
Apologies, Leonard. Do you mind standing actually behind the podium and very close to that?
Oh, okay.
We're getting feedback that we can't hear.
All right. Okay, good. So to do this, so we need to. So I would like to focus on two key concepts. One is what we mean by what do we mean by governance. So service delivery on security, education, health, infrastructure. But then what we mean by constructive social capital is, first of all, we all know what social capital is: connection among individuals and the norm of reciprocity and trustworthiness that arises from them. But I add constructive because I would like to focus on how you get there and how you can make it useful and beneficial for the community as a whole. And the theory is simple and powerful and convincing. That information is power, that information is really key for democratic governance. The better informed voters will vote more often and base their choices on important issues. Information will lead to better service delivery and less corruption. Sunlight is the best disinfection. That's famous quotes. In terms of engaging citizens, it's also equally appealing. Uh, More engaged citizens should lead to improvements in governance, participatory democracy, decentralization, community-driven development. It is so appealing that the World Bank has spent nearly 28 billion on CDD over the last decade. 28 billion. So, and then this is just a list of papers that have looked at information campaign evaluations. So we have the paper, Studies paper with Banerjee, Duflo, and others, and the paper showed either no or not the results that was expected, at least mixed. And then my own work with Dean and others, the outcome is corruption, voter participation, results are mixed, at least not that we're expecting, because in fact, we find that, if anything, information gets people to stay home, not to go out and vote. So overall, if you look at the literature, the results at best are mixed. And the papers that are presented here are a good reflection of this trend. When you look at participatory governance evaluations, they are no different. You know, for instance, either for the first paper, Catherine Casey and others, there is some short-term effects that does not last, or that doesn't carry over several years. And you know, anyway, so you can see. So anyway, so overall, the growing consensus is that the empirical evidence on information campaign and participatory governance strategies is mixed at best. So now the question is that why don't these approaches consistently have a hypothesized outcome? So when you think about it, let's first focus on information. When you think about it, there are some limits to the exogeneity assumption that we make when we are looking at information. Because when people engage with new information, they automatically use different frames, different method of acquisition, beliefs on the credibility of the source. And you cannot always assume that away through randomization. And also, what you cannot assume away through randomization is that information has spillovers. As a result, the information that is given is rarely the information that people actually acted upon. So now the issue with engaging citizens is also that they implicitly assume that all forms of participation are equal and all participatory institutions are automatically good. So, but then the rules of engagement in participation matter. For example, you know, close to home, when you run, for instance, town hall meeting, it matters whether you have deliberation or not, whether it's one-way communication or two-way communication in the deliberation. It matters whether it ends with voting or not. It matters who set the agenda. It matters what is the agenda. So participatory mechanism has to be very, very specific. And as you say, the devil is in the details. But most of the time, those details are missing. So, but also, okay, typically what happens also, especially when we are looking at information experiments, we tend to jump straight from information to governance. While in the middle, informations are being processed by in organization, social networks, under specific rules. So information generates social capital or stimulates some type of social capital, and this leads to outcome. And what is missing in most work is not only the lack of specificity in how the organization, social networks process the information, but also even most work, especially the one working on information, do not even consider that intermediate step, which is really the critical one. You know? So what I think we need to strengthen, we need to tighten this type of research so that instead of focusing on information or on some vaguely defined notion of participation, we should focus on more on how to gather information, and participation shape social capital, collective decision-making processes. So one, I think, important advanced direction that the literature on information and participatory democracy or participatory mechanism should take is to develop ways of evaluating institutions so that we can actually estimate the intrinsic effect of institutions. Because institutions, for instance, leads to policy outcome, and those policy outcomes can be observed on a different set of institutions. So we need to find a way to isolate what is the added value of the institution versus the alternative institutions. A very interesting lab experiment done by Dalbo and others at Brown University, for instance, tried to sort of isolate the intrinsic effect of democracy. When you empower individuals to make a decision, as opposed to the decision being imposed on them, what difference does it make? And this is what I mean by intrinsic causal effect of institutions. And this is something which is in fact to be part of the research agenda. So what is the problem? What is the problem? How do you actually evaluate institutions? So it means that instead of randomly assigning a treatment, for instance, information, textbooks, deworming, you assign a decision-making process. And then the decision-making process could be proportionality rule, majority rule, deliberation. And that institution is assigned to a group of individuals who collectively and endogenously choose a policy. So what is exogenous is not the policy like we do, but it's the decision-making process. And the question is that, again, as I mentioned earlier, how do you best identify and separate out the effect of institution from the effect of policy? So with a colleague of mine, we developed a model to see how you can actually do that. So, I'm not going to go through all the details, but the idea roughly is the following. It's going to be an encouragement design set up with multiple choice. And then, but this exclusion restriction assumption is violated because the institution might have direct effect on outcome, besides the indirect effect that it has through policy. So what you do, first you estimate the propensity to adopt a policy among individuals in the treatment group, and then you assign that policy selection. So you assume, that the policy selection is conditional only on the observed covariates, and you compute the policy effect using propensity score matching. And then you derive the institutional effect by subtracting the estimated policy effect from the total effect. So we usually know the total effect, but we do not isolate typically of the policy effect. The difference between the two is what is going to be the institutional effect. So this will help, for instance, will be a bit different. That kind of framework is a bit different from the school-based management or CDD type project that we observe. So what is the difference? For instance, the participation, for instance, in the case of evaluating institutions will be open, voluntary, and then it will be very explicit on institutional details. Like it means specifically one thing. Participation means one thing, clearly. It means we have a number of people, they meet for 2 hours. The agenda is very specific, and the decision-making process at the end of the decision-making process is also very, very specific. Okay, so, and the model that we developed is one in which you have to start with a menu of options that could be open to amendment, while in the CDD kind of project, it's either completely open or highly restrictive. And the goal, again, as I mentioned earlier, is to infer the intrinsic effect of the process on outcome. So, okay, now let me talk a bit about the role of information. So I think I like the comment made earlier on the Uganda paper, that we need to sort of worry or care about the signal to noise ratio. So it, it means that we have to filter the relevant information before it's being processed by the individuals. Because I mean, it's something that we control. We can control that. We cannot let it. You cannot leave it to chance. The same way we cannot leave it to chance the decision-making process within the organization. Because we want to, not that we want the experiment to work necessarily, but we need to know what we are talking about. We need to know what information people are working on precisely. We also need to know how this information is shared, and the mechanics through which the information is shared within the organization with social network is something we need to control. So that if we find any effect, we can clearly attribute it to an institution, to set of information that we actually know what it is. So, and information is key to this to this kind of exercises, because information acts as a coordination device among the individuals and they shape social networks. So, there are a lot of project papers, for instance, that do this kind of exercise relatively well. One that I like a lot is the democracy experiment in Indonesia by Oken in 2010, that clearly comparing two set of institutions, representative-based meetings or direct election-based plebiscites. And you see the finding, increased knowledge of a project and so on. But then the problem with that paper is that it's all perception-based outcome. It's not actual outcome. So, but also for the purpose of the talk that I'm giving, it doesn't clearly differentiate the total effect from democracy effect. Because when you look at the total effect, it has policy effect and the intrinsic institutional effect, and this has not been done. So it also ignored the selection effect into treatment group. And anyway, so why? Again, because policy outcome in treatment and control group might be different. So but it's something that could be explicitly modeled. This is not the case. Okay, so one example where we care about institutional detail of the institutional details of citizen engagement. It's the voter engagement intervention that we did in Benin, that Stuti mentioned in her presentation. So we find that the control is rallies, one-way communication. The treatment is deliberation, and why this might work? Well, because in deliberation, you might have voter coordination because people learn about each other's preferences. You might have better platform transparency because people ask good questions and get answers and they know more about what's going on. You might also have platform customization because they allow politicians, for instance, to adapt whatever they are proposing to local conditions. So it's good for politicians because you cannot have some one-size-fits-all. You need to actually know what you want to do in each specific area, and deliberation helps you do that. But then it's also possible deliberation might also affect those who do not attend through constant information sharing. So, okay, important to note is that why we pick deliberation, because it's part of the culture. It's if there is one thing that pre-colonial, very, very dominant in pre-colonial Africa is deliberation. So people really understand what it is and they use it at least in many contexts very spontaneously. So I'm not going to go through the details, but for instance, what I mean by town hall meeting is introduction to candidate platform, deliberation platform, deliberation about the platform, and participants invited to propose amendment, summary of the meeting, commitment to transmit the meeting feedback to party leadership, and so on. Comparison village means something specific as well. So we find effect. I'm not going to go through the details. And we also discuss the mechanism, for instance, whether it's platform transparency or voter information sharing and so on. Okay, now another project that I think is also very interesting for this exercise is the town hall meeting by bureaucrats experiment. So basically, you have poorly motivated bureaucrats, and you have low trust, very dysfunctional local bureaucracies. So we came up with a town hall meeting that runs as follows. We come up with a town hall meeting that runs as follows. So first, um, so we collect audit report, and then we get the report to be discussed closed door by local bureaucrats. The mayor is not present, only the chief of staff is present. Okay? And then why? Because we do not want finger pointing. Because what we want is to build some kind of bureaucratic cohesion by the participants, and the idea that we are all in this together, and to build something like a esprit de corps, if you will. So we thought that having the hierarchy present would not be a good idea. So, and then we measure outcome not only in terms of how cohesive the, cohesive measured in many ways the bureaucracy would be, but also public good outcome and so on. By the way, the information that we provide is not just the audit report. We also have citizens satisfaction report for bureaucrats to discuss. I was inspired to design this when I was inspired by something that happens quite often in professional sports. When a team, especially in the NBA, loses like 10 games in a row, then you have players only meeting, where the coach is not present, the management not present. You don't know what transpired. What you see afterwards is that now they are ready to fight for each other. They are ready to work together as a team. I thought that something like that perhaps could work in the context of bureaucratic public management. That's why we came up with this. Okay, now, as you can see from this exercise, it's all the action is about how you design the rules for information processing. Obviously, I don't want to throw any information to those guys. I'm very selective in what I give them. I'm interested in audit report so that they have something very objective to work on. I also give them citizen satisfaction report so that they have a sense of accountability, or a sense of accountability, or some to the public as a whole. Okay, and then I add or subtract features of the deliberative process that can help me sort of achieve what I think I could achieve. That's why, for me, secrecy here is critical, and the fact that the chief of staff is there moderating the discussions is also very important. So, and so this will help me illustrate very well what I meant earlier by the intermediary stage, where you build social capital, constructive social capital among the individuals, so that you can ultimately improve governance. So that project is done. We have the data. We try to see what we are going to look at the data and see what it says. So overall, I think that information and participatory type, citizen engagement type experiments are crucial, are extremely important. And that's why, it justifies so well why all the development agencies and academics have spent so much energy and money and resources into understanding them. But for me, it's not good enough. We need, first of all, not to leave the outcome to chance, but also, which means that we are selective in the information that we provide, you know, but also that we focus on designing and implementing the rules of engagement in the deliberative process. And so that what we'll be suggesting to governments, what we are suggesting to communities is that here is how you talk. Here is how, no, here is the best way you can actually sort of engage each other, try different kind of decision-making processes, different kind of institutional settings within organization, within social networks, and then pick the one that will maximize the outcome that we care about. So what I'm suggesting, empirically and theoretically, is something which is at the intersections between organization economics and social network theory, you know, and it should be deliberatively normative in a sense because we are looking for something that will maximize impact. And what is interesting is that you know um, the recipients might be actually far more open, far more sympathetic to this process than we think, because they don't they don't look so dramatic at all. I mean, what's wrong by saying, well, before we deliberate, someone is going to cook some information for us and we work on it? There's nothing, you know, unnatural about it. What is wrong by saying before we this meeting in particular, because we need people to be free to talk to each other, before we need to build some kind of horizontal accountability, what we are going to do is the mayor is not going to be there. Only the chief of staff will be there. You know, and so what I'm saying is that not only this will be effective, you know, as a design and implementation strategy for research, but the take-up rate by government should be quite high, and at the same time, you know, even external validity will not be a big problem, especially given that those institutions are in fact many of those institutions that we are proposing. I think that actually happen in real life. So anyway, so I'm pushing personally this this agenda. So I hope I have been, um, you know, at least slightly successful in persuading to go that route as well. Thank you very much.